All right, hi everyone. So I am Alicia Walsh, and in this video, we're going to be focusing on creating a 3D model from photogrammetry in outdoor settings, so such as large landscapes, buildings and structures, or smaller objects that are located outside. And there are usually many more variables to consider than there are when shooting photos indoors. Such as weather and lighting, the tools that you'll need based on the size of the object or the area, and how to access the subject. So therefore, outdoor photogrammetry requires a bit more planning. So there are many reasons to create 3D models using photogrammetry of exterior subjects, so such as investigating architectural construction techniques or construction phases, either of structures or during excavations to document soil layers. You could use it to document changes or erosion over time of a landscape or an object. And you can use it in landscape survey, in which you can also apply other digital applications, such as multispectral imaging or spatial analysis. You can use it for measuring, and it's commonly used for archiving to increase accessibility and preservation. So depending on your subject, you'll need to think about what tools you'll have to use. So drones are a very common one used these days to document large areas. In the past, balloons and kites were commonly used in place of drones. But satellites, aircrafts, buoys are still used, as well as handheld DSLR, and sometimes with extendable tripods in order to reach those hard-to-reach places. So when you're documenting large areas, such as landscapes, it's wise to georeference your model. And this is the process of adding geographic information to the image so that GIS or mapping softwares can place the image in its appropriate real-world location. And to do this, you would place landmarks in your area and take GPS points of these markers. And these are known as ground control points. And you can see on the image in the bottom there, they should be placed evenly and systematically. So as I mentioned, there are many variables to consider if you are image capturing outdoors. And that's why you need to carefully plan out how you're going to approach your image capturing. So it can be a good idea to do some reconnaissance the day before you're going to take your photos in order to see what time of day is best in terms of lighting and shadows, and working out a system for taking the photos. So the first thing you'll want to consider is the weather. And it's best to capture your subject on an overcast but dry day, so there are less shadows on the object. However, cloud cover is another consideration when taking landscape photos with a drone or an aircraft. You would want to have either complete cloud coverage or none at all, since a few clouds can cause their own shadows on the ground. And the weather and lighting should be consistent when taking your photos. So you wouldn't want to begin shooting in the morning and then go back later in the afternoon to take more photos, because then the light has changed. And again, you need to identify which tools you'll need to use to capture all areas of your subject. If you want to capture a large building, a drone would be your best bet in order to get photos in high areas or of the roof. And you may also want to consider how accessible your subject is. If you want to document a historical building, for example, you may want to do this at a time when there are few people around who may otherwise get in your photos, or consider if this particular site is open to the public at the time that you want to take your photos. And if you are operating a drone, depending where you are, you may need a permit, and there are certain restrictions about where you can fly and at what height. And finally, image capturing large areas can seem overwhelming and daunting at first, so it's best to plan out ahead of time how you're going to approach it. So different subjects will require different approaches for image capturing. If you have a planar surface, so something relatively straight and flat, this is the easiest thing to capture, since you will basically have to shoot in a straight line along the surface. And you'll still want to change your camera angle, but it will require less photos. The important thing to remember is to frame your image in the center of the camera and have 60 to 80% overlap between two images. And take multiple photographs, framing as much of the area in the camera as you can, so don't rely solely on close-ups. Close-ups are good for capturing detailed surfaces, but they can be more easily aligned with the reference points from the whole framed photos. And other subjects, such as this photo of the Royal Palace in Amsterdam, will require a lot more planning and more photographs. So it's best to approach this by dividing the subject into segments, so that you know that you're capturing all areas and you have a systematic approach, which can make the process less overwhelming. So you could start in this area outlined in yellow, take your photographs, and then move to the green one, but making sure that you have enough overlap between the two segments to align them. And if you are wanting to capture both the interior and the exterior of a subject, if you're moving inside a building, sort of the same routine, you would plan out areas, but remember not to just stand in one place in the room, but move around the walls as you go. So some other considerations when shooting are building texture surfaces. Photogrammetry relies on reference points in order to build a point cloud, so it helps if there's enough variation on the surface. So when shooting subjects from a distance, it can be difficult to see variations on surface texture. So even colorless textures can be a problem, such as stucco. But if you move closer to the surface, you will see that the stucco surfaces do have more variation than it looks like from a distance. So that would help with the aligning, and it creates a more detailed model in the end. And brick is less of a problem than stucco, since there's more variation in color, but newer brick can also be problematic since it has an even repeating pattern. So historical brick buildings with a roaded brick would work much better. So I'm just going to finish with some quick examples of projects that have used photogrammetry outdoors. So this project, undertaken by Historic England in 2007, used drone aerial photogrammetry to document a major house plot in order to document construction sequences. So they used ground control points to optimize alignment in Agisoft Metashape and to orient the area so that they could eventually import the model into GIS. And in GIS, they were then able to analyze archaeological features that they were unable to see from their viewpoint on the ground. Another project from 2018 used a combination of drone and close-range photogrammetry to create a 3D model of a villa in Italy. And the aim of this was to use 3D models as a way to monitor the villa's state of conservation, which would help in restoration projects. And you can see their process for acquiring images from the two photos on the left. And finally, as many of you will be creating 3D models of subjects smaller than buildings and landscapes, I've included this 3D model that I created after excavating the skull of a horse. And these photos were taken with my phone camera on a sunny day. So there is quite a lot of shadow on the object, which I didn't mind too much on the final model, but you can see that the top of the head is very bright because that's where the sun was directly shining onto it. So these are the basics of conducting photogrammetry in outdoor settings. Remember that planning is key for this, and it helps to document your process so that if errors do occur, you have notes of what worked and what didn't for next time. And you may also benefit from using a different tool to capture your photos or under different lighting conditions. There we go.